Hello, my name is Scott Nelson from the Two Bridges Art Academy, and I've been welcomed here at the Willard Clock Museum in Grafton, Massachusetts to do a demonstration and find my path today to a plein air painting. So, welcome, welcome. When we think about plein air painting, one of the things we want to think about is location. Well, we have a beautiful location here, but the fact of the matter is there's a lot to look at. And as an artist, you have to settle in on a composition that works for you, and that actually makes a nice painting. So I wrote out some different things I'd like you to read and possibly absorb, and maybe that'll help you become a better painter and or artist yourself. First of all, what I like to say is when you're painting is to arrive at the location with some portable tools. Less is more. You don't have to bring in every single paint color in your palette. You just got to show up with something to render something. Keep it simple. Dress for the weather. Luckily today we have a beautiful day that's in the mid 60s with a little bit of wind, but it could also be rainy with a lot of bugs, so be prepared. Find your location, which we'll do in the coming minutes, but don't settle on the first thing you see. You want to walk around and work out the different compositions. When you do settle on something or a location that catches your eye, is you want to do what we call thumbnails. Now thumbnails can be, if you think about a thumbnail, that's pretty small. It's kind of a little mock term for a 3x4, 5x6, sometimes even smaller little sketch. Usually done in pencil, graphite. I'll even try today to do one in watercolor to kind of set the tone for what I want to do in the future. Third, look for an interesting silhouette that has high contrast in values. Artistically, you want something that has not completely all one color. We have a beautiful building here, but what I'll be looking for is interesting light. The lights and darks is what my eye is going to go to, and that'll be what I'll be looking for as I move around the property. And then finally, one thing that comes into mind also is the medium you intend to work with. Today I'd like to try to work on a pen and ink with a watercolor wash. So that's going to set the tone for my sketches. But you might show it to a location and work on acrylic, oil, pastels, even a pencil drawing is perfectly fine. But that might dictate how you do your thumbnails. So keep that in mind. So let's go walk the property. Okay, coming back to looking at different spots on the property. An awesome view that we have right here is straight on the Willard Clock Museum. It's a beautiful angle. But what I typically do is I kind of step back and sometimes I'll frame my hand and I'll look at it from that perspective. I say, does that work? And I can move it around. You'll sometimes see an artist doing that. A great way to do it. But for some reason, this one doesn't grab me. The fact of the matter is it's straight on. There's no depth perception. And although there's some nice shadows going across the front of the building, which is something I might key in on artistically, it's not really grabbing me. So I'm going to move to another location and see if that catches my eye. Okay, I've moved about 20 feet over, not far, but you can see completely different experience. We now have some sunlight hitting the side of the building, visually interesting. We have a 3/4 view, something that will catch my eye artistically. We have shadows and we have trees that are starting to come into play as far as the composition goes. And I'm not 100% sure, but you can even see a nice little barn off the right-hand side too. So that's 3 different things, all little micro moments that might be artistically interesting to capture. Will this be what I land on? I'm still not sure. Let's take a walk. We're at a third location. It's a good one, I like it. We have a little cottage right here, and what's really exciting is that tree. That tree is a beauty. It's right in the foreground. Visually interesting, throwing a nice cast shadow. It's a fantastic thing for me to paint. Coming into the location, I've driven by it before. This is what caught my eye artistically. Unfortunately, it's not on the list of things to paint, so we have to move on. But artistically, if you're ever out and about in Grafton, Massachusetts, take a look at this cool cottage and maybe you can paint it yourself. Well, I've arrived at my last location. I think I've settled where I'd like to render the final piece of artwork. I'm going to do some thumbnails first, remember. Why did I settle on this spot? We have a nice little gate right here. We have a stone wall, classic New England. We also have the entirety of the museum. So lots to look at, and I think from this angle, there's some interesting light sources as well that maybe I can heighten. Where the front of the museum is illuminated right now, and we have some of the front of the barn. So visually, lots to look at. So I think this is where I'm going to settle in. So now let's do a thumbnail. Okay, I've sat down in my chair, which is usually I work in an easel, but today is chair worthy. I'm going to start off and again pick this view because of the foreground, but initially my thumbnail sketch here. I block it out on my sketch paper. I'm going to initially think about, rather than trying to capture every window, every single roof line, every single element right here, right now. I'm not so interested in that. What I'm more interested in is just filling up that space with a piece of vine charcoal, right? And allowing myself, when I'm sketching right here, to just think of the silhouette of the entire scene. So that mass right there that I've done is going to be translated eventually into my quick thumbnail sketch. Thumbnail sketches shouldn't be more than 5-6 minutes at the best. So I'm not looking to capture a ton of detail. It's just to rough out the details. I'll come back in with my eraser and I'll remove some of that. It's going to be a quick process. As a side note, here's my little traveling supply kit. I said travel light, and this is trying to prove it. I have a pen, a brush, a blending tool, a few different kinds of pencils, that vine charcoal, and there's even an eraser right here. And that can all be wrapped up very lightly. I could take a bike ride and take this with me. So that's how I like to do my sketching on location with this particular kind of setup. Back to the sketch though, using the side of my woodless pencil. If you've never seen a woodless pencil before, it's coated with plastic, but this entire edge right from here to the point is exposed graphite. I can use the side of the pencil just like the vine charcoal. I'm going to start roughing out some of those shapes that I'm seeing and see if I can force, and I say force, essentially some of the things that I'm seeing in front of me into that initial vine charcoal. I'm just looking for silhouette and shapes, nothing more. And I like people who are starting to work on their sketching skills to understand that their first sketch out of the gate should be prepared to edit. Always edit. Never settle in on your first sketch. Everything you're doing is one and done. Always be willing to make adjustments. In fact, you make adjustments up until the very last minute with all of your drawings. And even the paintings. Although I've ruled out my thumbnail sketch, if right here I decide I'm not going to be able to capture enough of that stone wall and gate in the foreground, it's okay to go outside it. Don't shrink things down and change things out of proportion just to accommodate. Just work outside your boundaries. Rules are made to be broken. I come back in with my eraser now, and as I talk about looking for the light, now I can remove some of that gray tone that I initially put down with the vine charcoal and look for high contrast areas. On the front of the building right there would be a nice spot. Some cast shadow on this element. The entire barn right here, the front of the barn, is also exposed by light. Now I'm just going to go back in and try to strengthen some of my darks. That's all. And again, this doesn't have to be perfect. This is just a sketch. Will I use it? I don't know. It's fun drawing at all times, though. You notice I'm not really drawing windows. That's okay. I mean, I can make a suggestion where windows are going to be placeholders. But don't come to a location and feel like you have to draw every detail in every scene and get it right on location if you're doing sketching. Just these big geometric shapes is going to be more than enough to carry the day. I think it's about 5 minutes, maybe a little less. It's my first thumbnail. Will that be my final art? We'll see. I'll try another one. So I've finished my first thumbnail. Looking at it, there's some things that I like about it and some things that might work and might not. I did edit out this element of the barn. The roof was stopped. I'm not sure composition-wise if it's needed, or maybe it needs to be, because another way to look at this would be to capture the other part of the gate on the right side. So to reduce the building size down, capturing the gate on both sides versus just one might be another option. So I'm going to consider doing that, but I'm also going to think about how I'm going to approach my silhouette. The first time I did it with my vine charcoal, I filled in the space of the silhouette, but you can also sometimes think about the negative space around the object, and that's what I think I might do here. So the trees and the sky are the negative space. In other words, it's the opposite of what you're rendering. So the driveway or the road that's passing in front of us, oh, wind's picking up. Be prepared. Is to just sometimes work with the negative space will sometimes help with the composition. I hope that you can see the difference between the first time I filled in the space and now the second time where I've just done the top and the bottom. So now let's see what else I can do with this sketch. Because I have to think about capturing...
Do you want to put like that on the top? Would that help or no?
I can put it right here. I just clip it. Thank you though,
okay.
That's good.
I say I have a clip that might just weigh it down a little.
I got the clip right here.
Do you want this for like the right upper right corner?
Thank you, I'm good.
Okay.
Appreciate that though. Look, you came prepared.
I have my little kit.
Yeah, I love it. As I visually, again, I put out my hands, I'm trying to frame the image. Something, because this is wider than tall, capturing everything that I want to capture in the image is something that I need to think of. So sometimes you need to give yourself some place markers. A place mark would be to the left, to the right, to the top, to the bottom, something to key in on. So for right now, I'm going to put that line right there as the far right side with that fence post to the gate post to the right, and possibly this one over here as the opposite of it. Now if I can put everything inside the frame, will that be a better composition than that? We'll see. So I'm going to continue on and go back to how I just sketched before, and this time I'm just going to use the side of my pencil and just rough out another silhouette and just capture a messy suggestion of what I'm seeing in front of me. Understanding the idea is to just edit, and not be beholden to anything here. This is what will eventually end up in the trash, but this will hopefully make my final artwork much better. As far as what I'm looking for now too, and I'm trying to, this is the front of the Willard Clock Museum and then the barn to the right. I'm trying to think of spatial distances. The top of this roof line right here, as I use my mind's eye and I draw it across, it's almost lined up with the top of the barn. So that's something I would like to make sure I think about. I can't draw the barn high or low. I'm trying to use my mind's eye to do a placeholder again to think about where that might be, a location. So the top of my barn shouldn't be higher than that. And if I'm wrong, guess what? You edit. Always be willing to change if you make a mistake, because there is no mistakes in art, really. Something that often comes up in my classes is allowing yourself the grace to edit something out. Although this is a great scene with the driveway that leads up to the Willard Clock Museum property, there's a site map that's right in my center of my line for visitors to come and find out and check out the grounds. When I look at that myself, I don't know if that would necessarily make for a good element in the painting. So am I allowed to edit that out? Sure. You shouldn't have to put every element that you see in a painting and come back and make sure that it's there. Trash cans, automobiles, lots of different things that might be in the viewer's eye. that can help it, or maybe it doesn't. So if you decide to edit out that little sign right there in your final piece, you're allowed to. As a quick aside, when you're doing sketching on site, sometimes it's easy to forget where the sun is, where the light source is. I'm going to take special note in the border of my sketch here to draw a little sun. It's always fun to remember where the light source was, to remember as the sun moves, it's going to change things. So this direction of sunlight is going to remind me that that's where the shadow should fall based upon the light to my upper left-hand corner. Back to my eraser. Remember, just like I did last time, look for where that light moments are. And one of my favorite things to do is capture spackled light, or light that comes across the ground. In this case, the trees that are out of frame are sending nice long shadows across the road in front of me. That's something as an artist I'm always looking for. Those long shadows that'll come at me, and you can even manipulate them if you need to really accentuate that. But to me, when I'm looking for a fun part of a scene, as beautiful as this building is, it might be those shadows that are coming at me and the light on the front of the building that'll make this a better painting or drawing or whatever we decide to do. So there we go, 2 different thumbnail sketches, both relatively quick. 2 different approaches. Now the decision is which one's going to make for a better final piece. Do you have a favorite?
You asking me?
Yeah, Lisa, do you have a favorite? Which one do you like?
All right, I'm going to be bad and say the bottom one.
I like the bottom one too.
I like the bottom one too.
Yeah, I do too. I think it does everything I wanted it to do.
I suppose that's why you do multiple.
Yeah, right. Had you settled
You
in
wanted
the
him to
first
stop with one and lie.
I know.
one? Yeah, you were lying. Well, welcome back. I've switched gears now, and I'd like to do a quick watercolor wash of my location. And as mentioned, my final artwork is intended to be a pen and ink drawing with some watercolor added to it. This is not a traditional watercolor. But I'm here, I have my paints, let's put them to use. As far as my preparation for my drawing, you can see that I've done a little bit different this time. I've actually done more of a line drawing, and that's not to replicate, I'm trying to be any more particular on site, but it's to think about a little bit easier way for me to put down my watercolor paints. Now when you go and do a quick thumbnail sketch in watercolor, you have lots of different color choices. We obviously have a beautiful color of the Willard Clock Museum, a nice burgundy maroon color. Awesome. But do I need to capture exactly that color? I think I'd like to just think about one color. And we call it a monochromatic painting. A monochromatic just means one single color, stick with that color, and just like I did with the graphite, capture lights and darks. I have a little travel palette right here. This has my primary colors in it. I'm going to add my little water right here, and as far as traveling light. It's just a coffee cup. I filled it up with water and I'm good to go. So with a little lid, very easy to travel around with it. And this is a large cup, of course you don't need even this much water. When I'm placing down colors here, again, I'm not trying to do a real painting. It's just to think more about the values that I'm seeing here. And the values would mean to me would be the difference between the tree line and the sky. If you look at that and you were to assign it different grayscales, maybe the sky is at a 2 or 1, the trees might be at a 4, potentially a 5, the building might be at a 7, possibly an 8, and then some of the darkest spots you want to be at a 10. So the hope for any good thumbnail, any good sketch, any good painting is to have a huge variation of color changes, or value changes I should say. And you look at that sky and then you look at some of the colors that are in the building, contrasting would be the visual interest. So that's all I'm trying to do here. Capture that I have a difference of value, nothing more. This is, again, a thumbnail. Keep it in mind, just like I did with the graphite, keep watching for the light. This side of my building here would be in light, this side in darkness. Around the windows here, a few little light moments there, something I probably have to remember, that there's a little light moment right there. That might be a nice thing to catch your eye. Back into the darkness. More darkness. Now the front of the barn has some cool things because you have some cast shadows that are going across it from the different tree branches that are coming in from off camera. That to me might be a highlight of also. The front of the Willard Clock Museum and the front of the barn might be something that when I go later on to do my final pen and ink with my wash, a nice little moment. So I'm always looking at the scene and I'm always trying to learn what I can focus in on. And again, if you've never heard of monochromatic or if you've never painted that way, it's a great way to work on site. Single color, I can just focus on what's important, not trying to capture the perfect greens, the perfect maroons and violets, nothing more. As I saw with my graphite sketch, I love those shadows coming in across the cement. So I'm going to think about those right there as they come towards me to lead the eye. Might be a nice thing to really key in on. And if you ever think about your brush, you can use the back side of your brush to also scratch in some tree limbs right there. Who knew that the back of your brush can become a drawing tool in a watercolor? All right. I really do like this foreground pole right here, and you can see in my sketch that I didn't really capture it right there. When I do my final, I'll try to nudge over my composition more to feature that, including the rocks. But I'm just doing this as a placeholder right here, as mentioned, as a reminder that that pole is there and I want to draw it. Now, another interesting moment I didn't notice until I started to work on my next group of thumbnails is one of my favorite things to do out when you're doing paintings is to catch of all things like telephone poles. There's a nice little telephone pole off the side right here, and if you ever want to add a telephone pole in, more often than not, they're never straight. They're always leaned. So don't think a telephone pole has to be leaned. So if I decide later on, and this is just a sketch, to add in that telephone pole, I'll make sure that it's not leaned. And I also took note that the top of the telephone pole is at an interesting angle. Perspective-wise, it's too low, but I am adding it in there because it's just a sketch. So just a few more ways to bump up the contrast of lights and darks, where the shadows are. Considering I tried to do my first sketch in 5 minutes, second sketch in 5 minutes, maybe this one will be done in the end in 10 minutes. It's pretty good work to be, when you're on site, trying to capture the plein air, if you're going to then turn around and go back to your studio or your home and then work out more of the details. So that gives you a basic idea of where some of the lights and darks are. Oops, let me get the back of that roof back there, because that's a contrast. It runs right across over here too. Ooh, another shadow across the top of that roof over there. I didn't see it. Sometimes people say, when you go, why work on site versus from just a photograph? And often I work from both. I will work on from a photograph too, but nothing beats coming to the location to see what you have, the little nuances, things that make it more meaningful if you're on site versus just from a photo. So there we go. For considering, we have some different options here for me to now look at. What will all this help me? I think it will. So now I should go back to my studio and work that out. But before I do, I have one more thing to talk about. As mentioned, I'd like to do this as a pen and ink wash. Pen and ink and wash. And one of the things that you want to consider, again, when I'm on location here, is what my different shading techniques might be, and I'd like to go through them before I pack it up. So here is a list of different inking techniques that I will use in my final artwork. We have hatching, which is parallel lines next to each other, uniform closer together or further apart, and of course they can go in all different directions. But hatching is a good way to use to shade. Now cross hatching is the same thing, but it's as the name says, once you start to hatch, you then cross hatch it. You go the opposite ways. And the tighter you make your lines, the darker that element could be. So there's two, hatching and cross hatching, both ways for me to shade what we're seeing here. I've been doing with graphite and paint. I'm going to have to focus on that. Where in my scene will I use these techniques? Would I use it on the side of the barn? Would I use it on the roof line? I'm not sure just yet. Another thing I can also purpose is scribbling. Scribbling seems like the kind of thing that you would just do if you were having fun, but I use it as an inking technique that for a nice texture. The closer I get with my scribbling, the darker the line gets. But the more I scribble, the more I fill in the void of the paper, and it gets closer to dark or black, and yet still some of the white is shining through. That allows me to kind of hold back from full out black. So the wider my scribbling is, the more light that comes through, and the tighter my scribble gets, the darker it gets. But when used purposefully, it can be a great technique. I will probably use that in the wall that's in front of us. I can see myself adding scribbling, maybe some of the foliage here in the front, maybe some of the tree line as well, scribbling. One of my personal favorites is stippling, also dots. And that's literally what you do. We're going to replicate the same thing as scribbling, but we're going to do it with dots. The closer the dots are, the darker it gets. The further the dots are apart from each other, it shows a texture or a value. And when you do it with control, it's a good way to put in a tone. Now I could do my sky here with a wash, or I could do it with stippling dots that are separated really far apart, that just suggest that there's a color up there in the sky. So it's a nice way to think about adding, again, texture to something that doesn't have a lot of texture. Got two more to go here. Broken line, what would that mean? Well, when I'm going to draw something, if I'm going to be working in pen and ink, often we think about just drawing with a constant line. You start and you finish with the same line. But if you actually break up the line in different locations, your mind's eye will fill in the void in that line. It will look at that broken line and think of it as completed line. And where could I use that broken line technique? If you look at the clapboards, of course, on the barn, maybe the shingles on top of the roof, rather than drawing constant lines left to right, top to bottom, it would get very busy. That would be a spot that I might consider using a broken lines to break up the monotony of all of those shingles. So broken line will be my friend in that location. And then finally, line weight. Line weight is what it sounds like. You have a skinny line, and then sometimes you come in and you have a fat line. And here I have a micron pen, but I could use a crow quill pen that allow me to change the thickness. And I can also use a brush. Just like my watercolors, I do a lot of inking with my brush, allowing for a thicker line that gives me some line weight in different spots. For example, if I'm looking at part of the roof line, that cast shadow of the top of the roof where it comes overhangs might be a nice spot for a thicker line to kind of capture the depth of detail. That might be a nice place for line weight to be used. Or I could do that in scribbling, or I could do it in cross hatching. I'll know more when I get back to my drawing board. And I'm going to do that right now. I'm going to go back to my studio and see if I can finish this painting.
Excellent.